Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please take your seats, we're about to restart our program for the third segment. We're almost home. Only 3 more hours and we'll have you out of here. So if you will, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome back to the Speakers Bureau stage tonight's MC, Furman Vegas!
We've come to the part of our program where we're going to hear our second qualifying speaker. When you hear attention deficit disorder, you most likely get an image of children in school, having trouble paying attention in class and fidgeting in their seats. What many people don't realize is that it is not just a childhood disorder, but affects many adults as well. Statistics from WebMD show that approximately 5% of adults in the United States have been diagnosed with ADHD. Tonight, Jonathan is going to be talking about ADHD and how it has affected him as a child and as an adult. He hopes to spread awareness of adult ADHD so that it is better understood and to share his experiences to help other adults with ADHD. Jonathan Nowak.
How many of you have been in that car? The one that drives you to distraction, driven to distraction. Come on. Okay. Oh, great. That's more like it. We've all been driven to distraction at one point or another, but not so much as someone with ADHD. And like Furman had mentioned, when you hear ADHD, the first thing that usually comes to mind are children in school, getting into trouble, getting weak grades. How many people here have had that thought about children? Well, I am here tonight to share my experience, and I can assure you, based on my own experience as a child and as an adult, that ADHD does exist and does go through adulthood. Now those statistics, 5%, that's how many adults are diagnosed with ADHD. There's so many more that are not diagnosed and just go through life wondering what's wrong, or maybe not, and just dealing with the issues. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as ADHD, at least not from a diagnosable perspective, because it was not in the DSM, that is the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual of Mental Disorders, the Bible, the go-to guide used by the psychiatric community to make diagnoses, with criteria required for those diagnoses. ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, was not added to the DSM until 1987, which happens to be the year I graduated from high school. So for my entire school days, there was no rhyme or reason as to why I was the way I was. All that would happen were I would get these bad grades, I would get the comments on the report cards, which, and I thank my parents for saving those so I could look at them now. They were horrible, all those comments, but they were a textbook entry for ADHD. Jonathan is having trouble paying attention in class, he doesn't focus, fidgets around in his seat. All of these symptoms of ADHD I had experienced as a child, and as such, my grades, they were horrible. Now, we didn't have grades like A's, B's, and C's, and like that. It was either satisfactory, S, or N for needs improvement. In most subjects, I got that N. Especially effort. One of the comments that the teachers would make would be, oh, Jonathan is so intelligent, he would do so well if only he would apply himself. If only he would apply himself. And I've heard that so many times. And a lot of times people say this about people who don't pay attention, that they should apply themselves. Telling someone with ADHD to just apply yourself is like telling someone with clinical depression to just cheer up. It doesn't work. Same way you can't tell an amputee to just grow another limb. It just is impossible. Now, one of the interesting things is that one of the comments on my 4th grade report card was that Jonathan is always making excuses to leave the room, i.e. lost his lunch, his money, his jacket, his homework in the locker room. And I look back at this and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, go Jonathan, how creative are you? I couldn't sit in my seat, I couldn't just get up and walk around. I found creative ways, excuses, to get up and move around without getting in trouble. Or so I thought until I got the report cards. Now the interesting thing about ADHD is that, especially for those who grew up and went to school around the same time as I did, who didn't have the diagnosis as a child, it's hard to get that diagnosis as an adult. Because one of the criteria is that the condition was there by age 7. If you never were diagnosed at age 7, how can you possibly be diagnosed if that is one of the requirements in order to be diagnosed? When I was in my early 20s, I knew something was wrong and I decided to go see a psychiatrist about it. I was diagnosed as bipolar type 2. Now, we all heard of bipolar disorder, that's minor depressive disorder. That's the extreme highs and extreme lows, depression and mania. When I was type 2, they call that cyclothymia. That is where it's more rapid changes and not as extreme. And I was put on medication for that. A drug called Depakote, a very strong drug. I had to go for blood tests weekly at the beginning to make sure that it wasn't at a toxic level and that my liver enzymes were proper. That's how strong this drug is. And after a while, maybe 6 months to a year, I don't remember how long it was, I stopped taking it because I realized, well, I thought it was working, but I realized that it wasn't that it was working and helping me with the symptoms of ADHD, which I didn't know about at the time, but it was just making me more, I don't care about it. Just kind of dumbed me out that I didn't care about the symptoms. Went back to see another doctor. This time I was diagnosed as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. This time I was put on Prozac. Oh boy, was this the wrong drug. Wow, that made things so much worse. Now there are some criteria. In order to be diagnosed as ADHD, there's the hyperactivity, and then more importantly, because even though some people as adults will outgrow the hyperactivity, the urges are still there, but as an adult, we control them better. I don't have to get up out of the seat. I may fidget, I may move my knee, and things like that, but I don't have to get up out of the seat. So it doesn't really show as a symptom, but the intention part. That's where you have the missing details. Now, I see the big picture. This is why the teachers would say that I have all that I'm intelligent, I can do so well if I would apply myself. Because I get it, I get the big picture. I get that right away. Then when it comes down to the details, what do I do now? What do I do first? That's where we get lost. We get lost in the sea of details. Sustaining attention. That's another criteria. That's sustaining attention. Now, if it's something I'm interested in, I will be able to focus and stay in attention as long as I need to be. Sometimes to the point of hyper-focus, where I'm so locked in, like blinders, on one subject or one thing, that I miss everything else. That could be a problem too, because by the time I look up and look at a watch, and it's like, oh my God, it's been 3 hours, I'm late, and oh gosh, there goes another friendship, there goes another job interview, there goes another date. Something that I wind up missing because I lose track of time. Doesn't seem to listen when spoken to directly. Now, an important part of communication is maintaining eye contact with someone and being engaged and appearing engaged. That's a problem for someone with ADHD. Because when we're listening to your conversation, we're also have all these other thoughts going on at the same time. And that's pretty distracting as well. So maintaining that eye contact, I'm there, I'm listening, but sometimes I'm listening to that and we have the other thoughts as well, so it doesn't appear that we're paying attention. Sometimes we're not, but more times we are, and it just doesn't have that appearance of paying attention. doesn't follow through. Start a task, we call this multitasking. Or we think it's multitasking. Us adders, we can multitask better than anyone. Problem is, nothing gets done. You can be doing 5 things at once, you can start on one project, go on to the next project, even the next project, but they all remain unfinished. Especially some details left out, skip over something, forget one little thing that's important. Organization, that's another problem, that's part of this as well. Being organized. Well, if you're all over the place, it's hard to be organized, especially when your thoughts are all over the place. Think of it, the thoughts, because I say there's multiple tracks of thoughts. Think of it as listening to a radio station, while there's another radio station playing over it at the same time. It's hard to focus on just one of those. Interesting thing, when I was in school, in grade school, we would have our reading from our textbooks, and the teacher would have each of us read a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or a page. I was terrified of this, and here's why. I would look down at that textbook. I would see the words. I would process those words. My brain would process those words, and the words would come out of my mouth, or so I would hope. But I was always worried, what if instead of the words on the paper coming out of my mouth, what if it was the thoughts that were going through my head at the same time? I didn't know if I was going to be reading the story or blurting out something embarrassing. And so easily distracted, I would lose my place. So here I was, afraid to ever read in front of the class, and look at me today, now I'm a public speaker. Go figure. It's funny how things work. That's part of the problem with ADHD as well, as far as I have experienced it, is that blurting. We call it blurting out because we don't have filters. The filters are there sometimes, but sometimes they're not. That is a problem, but it could also be a good thing. ADHD, the D stands for disorder, and I don't like to look at it so much as a disorder, because there are some positive things. Creativity. Here's my theory on creativity. People without ADD, in my theory, think in a linear fashion. Start with A. You work on A, you're doing A, you're concentrating on A, you finish with A, it's closed, you go on to B. You're doing B, finish with B, you move on to C, etc., on to D. Now, the ADHD line is more radial. Start on A. While I'm doing A, I'm maybe distracted by B, and I go on to B. A is still open. Now I'm on B, but A is still open, probably unfinished, and definitely still open. And I might be going on to C, while A and B are open, and all those tracks in my mind, it's like a Google search going off at all times about all my past experiences. Now, in that, I may see a connection from A that applies to C. Those connections that other people might miss, I believe that to be the basis of creativity, seeing those connections that others miss. That's the start of creativity. The second part of creativity are the filters, or lack thereof. When you're trying to brainstorm an idea, one of the rules of brainstorming is you throw everything out there. You throw it all out on the table, whatever it might be, no matter how ridiculous it might be, whether it applies or not. But you turn off the filters and you throw everything out. And then, once you're done with the brainstorming, then you go through it. You see what's important, what will work, what might not work, but if you modify it, would. Those are the types of things that we do without the filters. So some people, the normal people, I say normal, we have those filters on and we have to turn them off to brainstorm. They're always off. Sometimes I have to think to turn those filters on, be careful not to blurt something out at an inappropriate time. But it can be a good thing, because that creativity can help in so many ways. It's just a matter of, I'll say it, applying yourself and remembering to do so. Again, going into taking out the D of disorder. One of my favorite theories on ADHD comes from a book by Tom Hartman. It's called ADHD, A Different Perception. He goes through an evolutionary psychology approach, looking back to the caveman days. When we were cavemen, the hunters, those would be what we call ADD, are the hunters. They need those traits, that distractibility. They have to go and feed their family. If they don't catch the prey, their family doesn't eat. So they need to be easily distracted. They're going after an animal, and another one that's easier to catch, distracts them, go after that one. At the same time, be very easily distracted by predators so you don't become someone else's meal. Because then again, your family won't eat. But then we slowly discovered agriculture. In agriculture, those are what we call normal people or the non-ADDers. Agriculture is, you get more bang for the buck. You get more out of the land, and you can feed more for the same amount of time and effort than you can from hunting. The problem is, the hunters don't have the patience or the concentration and the focus to concentrate on crops, to wait for them to grow, to wait for them to be able to be harvested, to organize them and to rotate the crops. So those who did have these abilities, they produced more food. Producing more food brings more people, more larger families. Larger families means more genes are passed on. So when we come now thousands of years into the future, to today, we have a minority of people with the hunter traits, what we call them ADHD, and the majority of people with the agriculture traits. Those are the normal people, as we call them. So this not really can be considered a disorder, it's just a different way of thinking. It's a different idea, a different way of thinking. But we have to find ways to work around it. One of the problems that I face is the concept of time. And most people with ADHD will face this problem. It's understanding what time is. I know what time is, I can tell what time, I can tell you right now it's not 3:40. But understanding time in the sense of what's coming up, the future. That's why I was always late on assignments, because something is due in a month versus something that's due in a week are the same. When it becomes real is when it's due tomorrow. It's when it's right in front of you, then all of a sudden it becomes real. So there's some tools, there's some ways to work around ADHD. We need those tools. And we need to work with them on a consistent basis. We need to use these tools regularly. And it's not a matter of training. It's not a matter of learning the tools and being trained to follow in that type of thought. And then being able to say, okay, we don't need the tools anymore, we've been trained, we learned. Same way someone in a wheelchair can't put up a ramp at the door, have them use it for a month or two and say, okay, you've learned how to get into the building, we can take the ramp away. You need to continually use these because it is a disability. It is actually a disability. It's even listed with the Americans with Disabilities Act as a listed disability that, for instance, you cannot be discriminated against as an employer. An employee cannot be discriminated against for ADHD as long as they are able to make reasonable accommodations. Time, for me, was one of the big ones. I'd be late for work pretty much every day. One of my coworkers would say, why don't you just leave 10 minutes earlier? So I was only 5 or 10 minutes late. But again, just like saying apply yourself, leaving 10 minutes earlier, it just doesn't work. I understand the concept of that, it's just putting it into practice doesn't happen. I lived 15 minutes from the office, so if I would leave exactly 15 minutes, it'd be perfect. Oh, but I have 20 minutes, that means I have time to do something else, and I would get involved with something. And then by the time I finish that, oh crap, I'm late again. Yeah. Reasonable accommodations in that case. I spoke with my manager and we worked it out that on those days that I come in 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late, I'll stay 5 or 10 minutes later or take 5 or 10 minutes less lunchtime. This way, the other people on my team don't feel like I'm getting something for nothing, getting that time for nothing. So it works out because there's ways to work with that as an employer. Keeping lists is an important tool. Keeping a to-do list is really important. It's important for everybody, but so much more so for someone with ADD. Not only keeping a to-do list, but keeping it in color coding. Because you have a list, it's just a long list of words. I'll look at that by the 4th line of that to-do list, I'm reading through it, and I was like, whoa, this looks like a bird. Color coded. When it's color coded, by category, by importance, figure out a way that you color code it so that things will stand out. It's no longer just one straight thing of lines of text. It's actually color coded, those colors will stand out. I've also developed a system which I call the to-don't list. Now, there's the to-do list. The to-do list, that's the list of all the things you need to do, all the items in order to reach your goal. Everything. You can brainstorm those, or then you organize them, color code them, and you put them together. These are items that you need to do towards your goal. But then we get distractions and other things that we want to do. Watch that new TV show. Go update my Facebook profile. Check my email. Make a phone call. Play a video game. Those go on the to-don't list. The to-don't list, you write wherever you put the to-do list, and it should be somewhere where you see it every day, because out of sight, out of mind has never been more true than for someone with ADHD. So you keep the to-do list always there, on a computer screen, on your desktop, on the front page of your phone. But the to-don't list, you write that out. You write that out on paper, by hand, which reinforces it. And then you have to acknowledge that it's not going to take you towards your goal. And one of the interesting things about this is that by checking it off, acknowledging that you're not going to do it, and actually checking it off of the to-don't list, on a subconscious level, satisfies a sense of completion. So you actively didn't do it. So you have your to-do list, you have your to-don't list. You have your color coding, keeping things in sight, coming up with routines. Put your keys in the same place every day, and you will not lose them. Of course, this falls apart when I come home with a lot of groceries, and the keys are in my pocket, and instead of putting it on that shelf right by the door, I wind up, I put the groceries down, I put the keys down, and I'm not paying attention to where I put them. Next morning, it's time to go. Where are my keys? Where are my keys? What did I do with my keys? And I can go crazy looking for them, and of course, once again, I'm late. Find the routines, stick to them. There's a lot of tools to help. There's a lot of things that we can do. But to anybody here who is ADHD or knows somebody who's ADHD, and I am not a doctor, that's my disclaimer, so take anything I say as a diagnosis, because everybody will see some of these traits within themselves. But for those who are ADHD and those who know somebody who are ADHD, I encourage you to speak to me, because I want to be able to give you more tools to help. This is my goal and my passion, to be able to help those with ADHD succeed in business, in relationships, and in life. There's nothing wrong with ADD, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and you're in good company. Did you know that historically, and since there were no diagnoses of this, these are speculations. Albert Einstein, ADHD. Vincent van Gogh, ADHD. Salvador Dali, ADHD, and maybe a little bit more. There's a lot of people. Winston Churchill, there's a lot of people who are suspected of being ADHD. And you're in good company. Don't look at it as a disorder. Speak to me. As I said, I'd love to help you to succeed. Thank you.